Hey guys, and welcome to this recording. So, I want to talk a little bit about something that I did a short on recently, which was about, it was just a very, very short video. It was about how it is okay, in my opinion, to quit things. I don't think quitting is something that should necessarily be seen as like a bad thing or something that is just overly negative. I don't think that's necessarily the case. And I wanted to just expand on that idea. I did also read an article recently that kind of was well aligned with my own thoughts on this subject, and I will link that article actually in the description below so that you can maybe read it and get some extra insights from that article. So I just want to do like a quick explanation, I guess, of what I mean and just talk about this topic a little bit. So I think that what it comes down to is that like human beings are not static. We are not supposed to be static. And even as someone who is interested in personality psychology, and like personality types and astrology and things like that, even with that, I'm not someone who thinks that like everything is sort of static or that we're in a box or something like that. It's actually on the contrary. So if you think of astrology, astrology is very much it's like a map, but it's very much like moving. It's like flowing, and we're moving with the astrology, and the astrology is moving with us, if that makes sense. So the planets go through certain defined patterns, yes, but they are, they're not staying sort of like in the same place, and so it's like, but there are certain sort of rules. I'm kind of going on a rabbit hole here, but like there are certain rules and certain like scientific rules and certain like ways that we may not necessarily understand, that are like systematic and can be systematically explained, for example. But I don't want to talk about that too much. But my main point is just when it comes to, I suppose, our own lives and how we do have the freedom of change, and we have the freedom to make up our own mind, and we have the freedom to quit things if we choose to. I think with something like quitting something, like whether it's a job or breaking up with someone, or stopping a friendship, or stopping a hobby and maybe taking on something new, I think it's just about like our own freedom to enter the unknown in a way, because we don't know necessarily like what is going to happen. So if I quit a job, I don't know if it will feel like the right decision in 5 months' time or whatever, or if it will feel like the wrong decision, or I don't know what will come up necessarily in my life. I can't know everything. There's certain things we can't plan, and there's certain things that we can't know. But I think with something like, if we're quitting something, it just is a personal choice that we're allowed to make, to sort of align better with our values, with our interests at the time. And so I think that actually goes hand in hand quite well with like astrology, in that like we don't stay static. Our interests do change. Our values might change. Our feelings about things change. What we're interested in at any given time, it's not the same things necessarily that we were interested in 2 years ago. And if you look at the astrology, if you look at your transits, that might actually correlate that, you were in a certain period psychologically, emotionally, in your life 2 years ago that you're not in anymore. And so you can kind of read that maybe from the transit charts. But anyway, let's not talk too much about that. But my point is that, nobody is, in my opinion, forced to stick with something when it doesn't feel anymore that like it's aligning with your values, or it doesn't feel like it's adding anything to your life, or that you're not adding anything to the world anymore with that interest, if that makes sense. So maybe you've been interested in something previously, and doing something and giving some kind of service or having some kind of interest where you're giving something to the world in this area, but you don't feel that you can necessarily do it anymore because the interest doesn't seem to be serving you anymore, and you don't seem to be serving anybody with as much enthusiasm or with as much it doesn't feel like things don't feel like they're aligning anymore. And I think it's perfectly fine to quit, especially if it does if it is a representation of you feeling like your values have now changed, or you're looking for something new. And so sometimes we actually have to get rid of old things in order for new things to arrive into our lives, and to actually create something new. Sometimes we have to give up the old as well. So I think quitting is something that we have like a negative, it has like a negative connotation, if that makes sense, or we have like a negative correlation with the word quit, like, oh, like you're a quitter. But I think we shouldn't let that kind of hold us back from changing our lives, or stopping a hobby, or stopping an interest, or stopping a friendship, if it means that like if it really just doesn't feel right anymore. And I think we have to listen to that inner voice sometimes about like, if something really doesn't feel right anymore, then maybe it is time to wean off, or just, in some cases, some extreme cases, you might need to just quit cold turkey, and so I don't think necessarily that we should be ashamed of changing something or quitting something, because we're not static, and there's always like new things that come up, and new things that we want to create consciously. So what I mean is that like there's new things that we want to create consciously, and there's also some new things that will come up regardless, that we don't even think about. So I think life is very much a combination of what we make of it and what it provides to us, or like what we pull to our lives, if that makes sense. So sometimes we attract certain things into our lives that we didn't even think about, because there's something energetically that we are attracting into our, there's something energetically about us that is attracting certain things into our lives. And then there's also the things that we consciously want to create and consciously want to do and give and express, and that's very much a choice. But there's some things that just kind of come up to us and come up into our lives that we didn't really anticipate, but it actually all makes sense. Maybe in a few months' time or a few years' time, you can see that like this actually very much made sense when it comes to where I was at in my life. So I have stopped several things recently. For example, I'll just give a quick example. I stopped participating in a certain community online, and it was something that was kind of in the back of my head for a while, and then eventually I made the decision to just tell them like, okay, thank you, but I'm gonna go now. I've decided that this doesn't feel right anymore. And when I look back at that time, which wasn't too long ago, I realized that it actually perfectly aligns, that choice to move away from that situation perfectly aligns with where I'm at now and where I was at then. Like it feels like something that was like the beginning point for a new me, or a beginning point for a new understanding of certain things and certain freedoms to do other things, because I was spending less time in this community, and so I had a freedom to do more things, different things. So it feels like it's kind of perfectly aligned. And I will also say, sometimes it hurts to leave something behind. Sometimes it hurts to quit. But I think when you just start to look at your life in a more like philosophical way, not saying that you just have to detach from the physicality of it. I don't suggest that at all. But there's a meaning to things. And so when you start to look at your life in a philosophical way, and with a kind of a bird's eye view almost, if that makes any sense, like you start to see the patterns and the correlations, and like sometimes something just it didn't fit in that moment, and when you come out, you know, it may feel messy when you first quit, but then in a few months time or a few weeks time or whatever it is, maybe a year, 2 years, you start noticing that like that was actually exactly the necessary thing for you at the time. But as we know, quitting doesn't come without its emotions, you know, so you may be stuck in that emotional turmoil of quitting at first, and like, what am I going to do now? You know, am I going to get a new job? You know, am I going to get a new interest? I feel like I'm left with a void now because I don't have this interest or this hobby anymore, or this job anymore, or this friendship anymore that was taking up a lot of my time. But after a while, you know, you start to notice that like actually that was the beginning point for something new for you. And it's just that there may be like a gap time where there's like a void, or there's, you know, you don't know where to go next. But after a while, it begins to make sense that like you couldn't be where you are now if you didn't make certain choices about leaving certain things behind in the past, if that makes sense. So I could say more about this, but I just wanted to give my 2 cents about this, and it's something that I might revisit in the future, and I will link that article in the description that I found very much kind of correlated to my own thoughts on this. And I haven't read it in a while, so I don't remember exactly what it said, but I remember that I was thinking like, wow, this actually correlates with what I think about this topic. So yeah. Thank you very much if you got this far. Thank you very much for listening to this, and subscribe if you're interested in my thoughts on various things. So thank you.